Greetings, as I, Taldain Empire, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. Are you ready to dive into yet another bit of lore from the world of Golarion and the Pathfinder role-playing game? We're diving into Cheliax today, an important nation to many venture paths. We're going to talk about it. We're going to dive deep into it. We're going to go over a bunch of its lore. Probably not everything. You know, there's a lot to go over. We're going to go over a bunch of it. I hope you'll enjoy joining me on this discussion, on this dive into it. But as I always say, please remember to do all the various things to check out and support me. Whether you're joining me live on Twitch, or of course later on over on YouTube, do the support things. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of algorithm supporting stuff to help me out here. Come on. Got more of these videos here. And my question today is, how have you done any of those adventure paths dealing with Cheliax? Or had adventures dealing with it? Because certainly there are many. I'm running right now Curse of the Crimson Throne. And that's what I'm using as a basis for my Crimson Queen adventure, and that deals directly with Cheliax in some kind of ways. Korvosa is a Cheliaxian colony, broken away from it, but descended from there, and still connected with it a lot. So, yeah. So you can see how it's interconnected in a lot of stories in the region. But let's talk about some good sources for you to do some additional research on, because I'm going to go over a lot of stuff here, but I'm not going to go over everything. And certainly there are some places you can go to look. And I would recommend starting out with the campaign setting book from 1st edition, a Gazetteer book, of course Cheliax Empire of the Devils, the Inner Sea World Guide, Cheliax the Infernal Empire, and finally, if we're going to go to 2nd edition, Lost Omens World Guide, which will kind of give an update of the results of most of the adventure paths. That kind of will have you an idea of how the story has changed officially. And there's the flag of Cheliax. So let's talk a little bit about Cheliax now. Let's go into our basics for Cheliax. What do we know about? What is this kind of nation? Well, the region it's known as is Old Cheliax. It's the region, and it's definitely connected to the people that settled it, the Taldains. Taldain Empire settled Cheliax. We'll get into the full history of it, but it's got that deep connection to them. It is a powerful military nation. It controls a very important area, the Arch of Aroden. That's the passage between the Inner Sea and the Arcadian Ocean. It's a vital trade route for a lot of the region's trade. So, honestly speaking, it gives them a lot of power. Granted, Cheliax as a nation has suffered a lot, even in recent years and in history, so it kind of pales in comparison. And the big thing that people see when they look at it is its government and its people. Because they're Diabolists, at least to a good degree. The worship of devils and Asmodeus is a major part of the place there. Certainly there are other religious beliefs worshipped, sort of, maybe. But when you dive into it, it's Asmodeus. Individuals that are more unique, open to everybody might be kind of good. And of course, from the capital of Igorian, Queen Abigail II currently rules. This tyrannical government, and adhering to the beliefs of it that the nation itself can get its full potential through believing and worshipping Asmodeus and hell. Does it help them maintain their power? They at least believe that. Hard to say if it actually does. It's a complex situation. But we do really have to look at the full history of Cheliax. So, as I get started in here, it is important to note, very important to note, historical revisionism exists in a lot of the personal history of Cheliax, if you would ask someone from there. Basically, historical facts are a slippery thing in modern Cheliax, in the nation. Especially when it deals with events that occurred before House Thrune took control. Before Queen Abigail the second, Abigail Thrun the second, took control, and her family. Basically, her family made Diabolism the state religion. Let's worship Asmodeus. So yeah, before they took their tyrannical control. So the current rulers understand history's power to inspire, and have been actively trying to eradicate any mention of the non-infernal past. They've even done this to their former allies, and more than a few noble families have fallen from favor with the Queen when they found themselves exorcised from official records. Because of this historical revisionism, a new state-sanctioned history is printed and dissented to the nation's universities' libraries every 3 months. Now, outdated older copies of books are collected by the Hell Knight Order of the Rack and burned in so-called clarity pyres. Heavy penalties are imposed on any organization that fails to offer up its previously signed volumes. New histories invariably have large gaps and omissions, sometimes to the point of making them unreadable. Despite this, records survive that have escaped the Imperial Ministry of Historic Accuracy's frequent revisions. These publications can fetch a high price on the black market, provided you can find a buyer who's not a paid informant for the Ministry. So, yeah. So, if you're a character in Cheliax, yeah, history is, Let's talk about that early history. Now that we know this is stuff that a character might not know. So the foundation of Cheliax was the westernmost frontier prefecture of the Taldain Empire, and occurred in 3007 AR. And it is pronounced Cheliax. Just to keep in mind. Just so I say that. Which again is like, still a ways a while ago. That's, you know, not the... Judging that, you know, it's 47 now, and this nation, this region, was founded in 3000. It's only about 1,000 years old, this region. And it remained part of the Taldain Empire for more than 1,000 years, basically until Quadria launched a massive invasion of Taldor. You see my Taldor episode I talked about, in 4079. That destabilization that occurred in Taldain, in Taldor, because of that, basically caused the rulers to relocate the majority of its military eastward. Aspects the Even-Tongued, the governor of the Cheliax region, knew that Taldor could not fight a massive war on two fronts, thousands of miles from each other, and basically declared independence in 4081. They knew Taldor would only remain focused on tantantic struggles with Quadria for so long, so King Aspects of the new nation of Cheliax incorporated Taldain Tal'Doris of Galt and Isgor by force, and Doran and the winged men of Devil's Perch by diplomacy in what became known as the Even-Tongued Conquest. And due to the size, military power, and ambition, basically Cheliax became the new dominant source of Avastin for 600 years. So it used to be, in this region, Taldor was king. They had spread their empire, founded this region, thousands of years went by, a massive invasion from one of their neighbors that had been a long rival happened. They went into a huge war with them, and during that war, their empire broke. And Cheliax, what we call Old Cheliax, came into being. The original Cheliax Empire. So, we now have the nation of Cheliax. Granted, it is still the same nation we have now, but it's sort of like with Taldor. Taldor is a much smaller nation now. Cheliax is a much smaller nation now. We'll get into it. But we're at the point in time now that they have this growth, they want to get bigger. They want to get stronger. They want to expand. So around 4137, they had friction with Absalom over trade in the Inner Sea region, and it was led by Prince Halid I of Cheliax, so they laid siege of Absalom. Hi, Kitty. The siege was unsuccessful. It still made sure that Cheliax was left as a major naval power in the Inner Sea, and basically gained control of both sides of the Arch of Aroden. In 4138, they also established a new colony on the western coast of Garun, named it Sargava. Done a video about that colony. It's no longer part of them, but I've done a video about it. Cheliaxian expansion to the north continued with King Hallod III launching the Ever War in 4305. And over the following century, the spanning reigns of 5 Cheliaxian monarchs, the empire conquered and annexed lands of Malthun, Nurthmis, Igor, parts of the Hold of Belkazin, Nidal, Varizia. The Ever War came to a close in 4410, when Cheliax renounced all hopes of further territorial expansion in Varizia and Belkazin. During this period, they installed a foreign ruling class in its newfound territories, and the descendants of these people still hold positions of power, even though Cheliax withdrew some control. See Corvosa. And a lot of other regions of that place. So the Ever War came to a close. Cheliax's ambitions still continued in a lot of ways, unabated within its own homeland and colonies, because of the Starfall doctrine. The prophecy stated the god Aroden would reappear in Cheliax in 4606 and lead humanity to new age with Cheliax at its helm. Bolstered what they perceived to be an endorsement by Aroden, Cheliax became a dominant cultural force in Avasti, and held a position for centuries. In anticipation of the return, they went to extraordinary lengths in the last decades of the Age of Enthronement to position itself for this destiny. The first Hell Knight Order, the Order of Rak, was founded in 4676 in the capital of Westcrown. And in 4605, King Gaspodar began the preparations for the reappearance of the god Aroden. But it didn't happen. Because, as hopefully most of you know, if you don't, Aroden died. So yes, 4606, the patron deity of Cheliax, Aroden, died. And so did Cheliax's century-long dominance of the region. Basically robbed of the divine mandate by the Starfall doctrine, King Gaspar lost control of the empire, and the fractious noble houses challenged the crown and each other for dominance. The first to do this was House Thrun, which rekindled a feud over land in 4608 with a rival family whose name had long since been erased by history by the Cheliaxian government. So, yes, it's unfortunate that any records surviving of that time don't really tell you who the original enemy of House Thrun was that began the first battle. But House Thrun basically took up arms first. So, for 3 decades, Cheliax was at civil war, with the various noble houses fighting for supremacy. Malthrun declared independence during this time in 4632. This was fractious, destructive, brother against brother, small tyrants rising to power, promising shelter to the worsening conditions. And leaders were quickly brought down by others seeking power, or eradicated by the many disease which went accompanied the anarchy. And as the years became decades, the people of Cheliax became more and more desperate, looking for solutions to this nightmare. The golden dream of Imperial Cheliax, long forgotten, and just darker methods to quell the fighting and restore order we'll look to. And one of these darker methods was finally brought to a resolution of the fighting, but it came at a steep cost. So after no clear victor in these decades of fighting, Abrogale of House Thrun signed a pact with the powers of hell, placing herself and the families in control. In return, she assigned a number of devils to boost her forces and others assigned to her as advisors. And with her help, and along with allied shadow callers from Nidal, she brought the heartland of Cheliax under her control, and gave her an amount of legitimacy. Baron Growlus of the Cheliaxian colony of Sogarva backed House Davian during the war, but Davian's ambitions were shadowed by the House Thrun at the Battle of the 100 Kings. Held near the city of Corinthier in 4639, the defeat of House Davian was the climatic battle of the war, signing the doom for all who opposed House Thrun. So yes, Thrun made a deal with Aroden, basically our current queen's grandmother, and brought into the Civil War. So even though people didn't participate, different people did not particularly like being under the rule of devil worshippers, honestly speaking, it was better than the anarchy of the Civil War. So within a year, House Thrun had defeated all other comers, and Queen Abergol I was crowned in 4640. Thrun had not forgotten the betrayal of Baron Growlus and sent a fleet to enact revenge in Sargotha in 4643. Expecting the attack, but unable to produce a large enough fleet to defend themselves, Growlus hired the Shackles pirates to patrol the waters north of Sargava. His gamble worked. The Cheliaxian fleet was sunk in Desperation Bay. A second fleet was sent in 4660 and fared a little better, but Sargava managed to hang on to its fragile independence until 4715, when its population repelled against its government and formed the nation of Vadrian. See my episode on Vadrian. Now, we're after a lot of the turmoil of Cheliax. And, this is an execution for criminals. Penalty for infringing the laws. So, yeah. We're better? So, House Thrun ruled with an iron fist. It still didn't mean Cheliax didn't have political turmoil. It's particularly true when it came to the process of who succeeded the nation's throne. After 32 years of rule, Queen Abergil I was murdered by her own son in 4672 and crowned himself Antonius I. And thereafter knows his reign lasted 2 years when he died from an incorrectly prepared seafood fish in 4674. Basically, think pufferfish. And was succeeded by his cousin, Terthuli Thrun. Fairly managed to last a little longer, but disappeared mysteriously nearly 8 years later in 4682. Upon his death, his niece, Caroliel, was crowned as queen. Much like her predecessors, Caroliel's rule was brief and marked by tragedy as she drowned under mysterious circumstances in 4696. She lasted a little longer, 14 years. Her death was not investigated by her cousin and heir Infernal, though he did not fare much better. He fell through the ice and drowned at the Adrivian River in 4709. 13 years later. And so is that same year, Abergil I's great-granddaughter, Abergil Thrun, was crowned Infernal Magistrex and has been managed to avoid tragic death since then. So she's merely ruled, 15 years now? Managed for 15 years. Pretty good for someone on the Cheliaxian throne. That's not the first queen. Nobody's really lasted, particularly long. I mean, close to that. She's gotten to that kind of point in time. Now you'd say, how has things been recently? Terrible for Cheliax. Unfortunately. So despite House Thrun's emphasis on discipline and authority, their rule has not gone unopposed. West Crown in particular has harbored subdued dissent and underground corruption for a long time. In 4710, the Council of Thieves was exposed and dismantled, representing a significant turning point. Recently, 2 major rebellions, one successful and one unsuccessful, have dramatically altered the power dynamic and weakened House Thrun's control over the region. They suffered a mighty blow in naval power when they lost a part of the armada in the Shackles, putting a temporary halt on its ambition to expand in the Mong Expanse. Soon after, in 4715, a violent rebellion known as the Glorious Reclamation erupted in West Crown and caused widespread social unrest. Although Queen Abergil's forces managed to crush the rebels and restore order by 4716, Ioma's faith in Cheliax faced increased scrutiny, and its adherents became cautious not to criticize the queen. A second rebellion simultaneously erupted in the Archduchy of Ravenel, which led to the declaration of independence as a separate nation. The exploitation in a flaw in the Kingaro contract. This move was a bitter pill to House Thrun to swallow, as they feared the consequences of a confrontation. Basically, a lot of weakened forces with the first time. Things are not doing great. Second nation declared independence through a contractual thing, and we're not in a position to fight back. So Cheliax is in a perilous position. It's got more challenges that are very threatening, pretty much more than it had encountered since those early days of the throne ascendancy. Its adversaries, particularly Andorian, eagerly anticipate an opportunity to strike. But Cheliax remains cunning and formidable, and its apparent weakness could be calculated employed to bait overconfidence. Let's see here. Their enemies include the Firebrands, a loose organization of freedom fighters created after the independence of two former Cheliaxian territories in Vidrian and Ravenel. Harathrin Sea Willies, an Ulfrin pillager whose raids have moved from Ravenel to Hellmouth Gulf in Corianton. After Ravenel's independence. Cronthus, a celebrated retired gladiator, rumored to have joined dissidents in allegedly killing Lord Mayor Admiral Enfaria. Minmar Vox, leader of the Swift-Hoofed Centaurs in the Egobaris Plain. Zarzu, the Crow Greenspan, suspected of leading a secret rebel group known as the Midnight Flock. So there's a lot of people that just are rebels or hate Cheliax's government, and they've got a lot of nations which are looking for real signs of weakness. They're cautious still, because they're like, you're just playing weak, or are you really weak? So yeah, 2 rebellions, 1 successful, 1 unsuccessful. Most of their colonies have broken away as a part of their empire basically crumbled during the time of the Civil War. Most of their colonies either declared independence or just walked away from them. So yeah, it's why Corvosa is an independent city-state. It's why Varizia and a lot of those regions are just on their own. Cheliax as an empire fell. Became what it is now, still a powerful force, but things have not gone well. Alright. Let's talk about the government. Because we can't speak about those that rule, and there is the queen herself. Isn't she nice? So, House Thrun, as I said, has ruled since 4640, along with noble houses that were willing to follow the philosophy of Diabolism. Basically, they found a bunch of nobles who were willing to follow them. And join with them. And I got a kitty. You can go on video now. It's not going to be a, She'll hang for a second before she runs away. So much of House Thrun's power was gained through the initial bargain struck with the Abergil Thrun and the rules of Hell, although additional pacts have been made since that time for greater power, and the current queen herself, Abergil II, rules Cheliax with the aid and support of Gorthalkek, her Nesseri advisor. And that's, basically, Nesseri are the new name for them. They would have been, effectively pit fiends and stuff like that, as of Monster Core. For anybody that's still getting into core stuff. So yeah, we got Abigail. Her infernal magistrix, Queen Agrabel, the twice-damned House of Thrun, rules as an absolute monarch. Her word is full weight of the law, and it's inescapable as any devil's contract. Even if she frequently changes her mind and has her former edicts and laws erased from the books of Cheliaxian history. She maintains control of the nation through complex bureaucracy of titled nobles, through fear, and hope of earning her favor. Noble houses. I am going to basically go loosely into the nobility here, but there are a lot of noble houses. There are also a bunch of noble titles. There's Magister, Magistrix, Prince, Princess, Archduke, Archduchess, Duke, Duchess, Paraduke, Paraduchess, Archcount, Archcountess, Count, Countess, Paracount, Paracountess, Archbaron, Archbaroness, Baron, Baroness, Dean Baron, Demi-Baron, Demi-Baroness. Look them all up if you want more details on it. And the houses, a couple dozen. I'm not going to go into a list of all of them. It's just, there's a lot of noble houses too. So keep these 2 facts in mind, just as I talk about this here. So, House Thrun, most powerful of the noble houses. Keep that in mind. But there are a lot of them. Some of these other noble houses have existed for centuries. Others were commoners raised after the Civil War in payment for their loyalty to House Thrun. So there's a combination of this. Most of the older houses survived the war, although those who align themselves with the Diabolists early in the war have claimed a greater prestige and wealth. So it's like even those that fought against Thrun, most of them were fought in the Civil War, survived in some way. They surrendered and quick enough to not be wiped out, even though they might have lost a lot of power, strength, members, that kind of thing. Whatever can be said about the new nobility's morality, they objectively rule more efficiently than the old nobility did before the war. So, yes, they're Diabolists, but they are very lawful, very efficient at what they are, at least the new ones. Cheliaxian nobility is arranged in strict hierarchy in three broad categories: dukes, counts, and barons, each with their own subcategories. For a sum of 9 ranks, modeled after the 9 levels of hell. Her magistrates and her family are above this order. Most members of the nobility continue making pacts with various devils in exchange for increased temporary power. Those who do not espouse diabolism keep to themselves. And any talk against the methods of the current regime can lead to complete eradication of an entire bloodline. So, let's talk about domestic policy a little bit. The governmental policy in Cheliax is focused on maintaining order and quelling dissent. It's tyrannical. This is a direct response to the 30 years of basically war and chaos that preceded it during the Civil War, as well as the absolute order inherent in the support of hell. So there's a great deal of physical peace and order which allow the lives of ordinary citizens to proceed normally. But there's a high moral crisis. Cheliax is far from the abomination of twisted evil that outsiders would maybe describe it, but does not really allow room for dissent. Nationalistic feelings run deep and are practically required to avoid suspicion. Ambition causes normal citizens to turn those they suspect as traitors to Cheliax for perceived promise of wealth and advancement. Organized secular and religious forces such as the Hell Knights and the Inquisitors further strive to quell dissent. The laws are based on the Asmodean disciplines, which also serve as the primary religious texts for Church Asmodeus. These laws are expansive and intrusive, and attempt to regulate nearly every element of a subject's public and private life. Because of this, many of them are not enforced, and many are not even enforceable, but they nevertheless serve the purpose of the government by allowing for prompt removal of undesired elements of society under some perceived or interpreted interaction. So basically, they're using a very, very, very strict set of laws on the book. They enforce core aspects of those laws, but if you mess with them, they just pick out these other laws. Oh, we're enforcing this law now! And also, in a sense, of just citizens to spy on each other even more. So Cheliax, with all its infernal connections, remains a wealthy, influential, well-armed nation. House Thrun not only governs its own lands, but profoundly impacts the destinies of many of its nations. Iceguard, Nidal, Rovinal have still complex and close ties with them. After years of enduring bitter warfare following centuries of exploitive near-colonial rule, Iceguard remains a subservient vessel to Cheliax. Its government tightly controlled and limited autonomy to shape its destiny. Nidal positions itself as an ally to Cheliax, albeit with a vast different perspective from Iceguard's. Rather than a willing vessel, Nidal sees his role as a trusted advisor to a like-minded friend. Rovinal recently broke away. So, gaining formal recognition as a free state, it remains unable to fully eradicate itself from influence of former ruler. Cheliax kind of keeps Rovinal pinned to the sea and controls all overland routes out of the nation, ensuring that basically they have good control of the region's economy and diplomacy. They're not in a position to reconquer the nation, so they're just kind of maintaining pressure and control over them. So Rovinal does have supernatural safeguards against direct military invasion, but it's still dependent on goodwill. Remember, they also control the Ouch Aroden. So if you go overland, oversea, the main way into the inner sea region where a lot of the major trade goes is controlled by them. So basically, as of 4719, House Thrun is kind of willing to accept Rovinal's independence, as an unfortunate but unchallenged reality, and they see it as basically both understand that the devil's mercy is capricious and memories enduring. So, if circumstances were to change, Cheliax would attempt to gain control again. So Hell Knights handled dissension amongst the Empire as military. They also boast one of the larger military organizations in the Inner Sea region, including the Cheliaxian Navy. Along with humanoid troops, they continue to use bound rebels as well. And economically, it boasts a Renux economy fueled on global trade, offering diverse goods of wines, olive oils, artwork, and imported products. Its luxury trade is especially esteemed throughout the continent. It's also a major importer of slaves until 4722, when Abigail Thrune liberated the slaves of Cheliax and its vassal states in the Emancipation Edict. Basically, keep the discussion to that after we're done this video, the talk here. We can talk about that. Possibly. See the pinned message. Effectively, after all the rebellions, Queen Abigail could sense there was still dissent in amongst the group. And though they were a slaving nation, they could see that that was a great source. They had a lot of them in the nation. So that could be the source of another rebellion. By emancipating all the slaves of her nation, her colonies, she saw as a thing to get these people as more loyal citizens now. She was the one that freed them. Not until after we're done this year. On this discussion, we can talk about it. See the pinned message. Let's talk about the geography of Cheliax. Geography of Cheliax. So, it's a large part of Vastian in the southwest here. It's about half the size it used to be, at its maximum size. It's still a very large country in the region. Beyond the Mendor Mountains to the north, it's bordered by its former principles of Nidal and Mothun. To the east, it's bordered by Isgort and Andorn across the Aspodal Mountains. The Inner Sea lies to the south, across which is Vrahadum on the continent of Gurund. To the west lies the Arcadian Ocean. There are 5 major regions, or archduchies, each of which is subdivided into duchies, further split into counties, then which can be separated into baronies. Remember the 3 groups, which are all some of the group, I talked about. However, not every grouping can be divided into smaller groupings. For instance, very small counties do not divide into smaller baronies. The 5 archduchy are fixed. There never can be more or fewer. There can, however, be more archdukes and are as follows. So there can never be more archdukes. And I'll call the 5 main archduchies. Effectively, these are the 5 main regions. They subdivide differently, but these are the main ones. The Archduchy of Hellcoast, with the hills of Devil's Perch, the settlement of Pezak, home of the Strix, the winged humanoids. They protect their homeland digitally, far more than dislike of any foreign rule. As much as they have distaste for House Thrune and organized Devil worshipper, they dislike foreigners more. They're like, we don't like you, but we're going to help protect you because we don't like them more. The Archduchy of Mendor, with the Mendor Mountains, and is the religious homeland of Cheliax. It's also the source of scores of Hell Knights, prepared for a life of ending servitude by the unforgiving nature of the land they inhabit. The Archduchy of the Heartlands, the Whisperwood, the Barrenwood, the Central Plains at the heart of Cheliax. The Archduchy of Ceremonium, with the Asphodel Mountains and the River Keld, forming a natural eastern border on Cheliax. And the Archduchy of Longmarsh. The Inner Sea forms in the southern border of Cheliax, the port cities built upon the bluffs. The Archduchy of Rovenal was a 6th one, broke away, now it's its own thing. The capital of Aragon, near the center of the nation on the banks of Lake Sorrow. North of Lake Stan Barwood. And, yes. They do maintain a foothold in Grund as well, by holding the southern end of Arch of Aroden, the province of Karjite, and thus controlling the Inner Sea. Its most distant holding is Anchor's End in Arcadia, which they do have still holding. Let's talk about the various cities in each of these regions. There's the Arch of Aroden, which is a cool cut. So we can break down each of these regions into the cities they are. We'll start, of course, with Hellcoast. So Hellcoast, from its capital of Belde, we'll talk about a little bit here. It's a town in the western, on the banks of the Masters' River, between the Mendorf Mountains and Barrowood. It's located, despite being actually located in the Archduchy of the Heartlands, it is the capital of the Archduchy of the Hellcoast. So that's a very interesting fact. It's technically, physically in the Heartlands, but it's the capital of Hellcoast. It's ruled by the House Throne-appointed Paraduke Marcelius Fruvian, who oversees the ongoings of that region. Other cities are Black Cove, Black Ridge, Kirk's Scree, Zach, which I mentioned, which is a very isolated town, Whisper Creek, and Windspire. I'm not going to go too into depths into all the cities here. I'll go into the depths more on the capitals a little bit, just because there's a lot of them. So, Long March, which includes Karajite. Remember I mentioned Karajite, that little province on the other side of the Arch of Aroden, so the Long March is the one for Arch of Aroden. The capital is Corianton, which is on the southern tip of the country, and is the capital of it. It's a military outpost. It's at the Arch of Aroden, and it's the western border of the city. It's also known as Port Indomitable, or the port of the City of Nine Forts. It's survived dozens of wars, and it's still a major trade outpost and military center. It is ruled over by the Lord Mayor, Archheathen Kermalto Kergavian, of the former Chelish Navy and Administrator. The city itself is, though. House Carganthion is the rulers of that region. Barley Bridge is another one of the region. Haumerius. Hingi, another port city. Kari, another port city. Machini. West Crown, which I will talk a little bit about because this is a large city. It's another one of the larger cities in there, because West Crown was the capital of Cheliax, and rumored to be the home and birthplace of Aroden, known as the City of Nine Stars. It was the greatness of the Cheliax Empire. Basically, since House Throne has moved the capital, it's become the Twilight City rather than the what it was formerly known as the City of Nine Stars. A lot of the remains of the nobility have there as homes and exiles of it. Basically, the city crumbles under mismanagement. That's where the Glorious Reclamation started from. Failed rebellion. And Westpool is the last part in Long March. There are only two cities I can talk about in Menador, in the Archduchy of Menador. Of course, there is Cantaria, and House Narikopolis is the one that rules over here, with the current ruler of that, Governor Opayan Neverlore, and the house. Cardini is the capital of this region. The other city is Tagenhol. Then we have, of course, Siriminium. I'm probably pronouncing some of these names very long, and I'm sorry about that. So House Hentherthane rules over the Archduchy of Siriminium, and their capital is Ostenso, which is a port city on the southern coast, also. It's basically the easternmost city in the country. It's home port of the Cheliax Navy, actually. So, as much as they've got a lot of naval presence and military presence over at the Arch of Aroden, the home port of their navy is Ostenso, so a little farther away along the coastline. Brasselwark is another city in their region. Lackenstell, near Missarius, Mamessiana. Again, there's a lot of these cities, that's why I'm kind of going over them pretty briefly, because there's so many. Because if I went into depths about all of them, we'd be here for quite a while. And finally, the Heartlands, which is the center of it. Guess who rules over that one? It's Well, Thrune, technically, but yes and no. You know, we have, I'll talk about all the other cities, and then I'll talk about Golarion for a second. Dracovin is one of the other cities. East Rikian, Everpine, Longacre, Nashire, and Sennar. Agorian, current capital of Cheliax since the Thrune Ascendancy. Okay. Its ruler is Asperix Rogaton, the High Priestess of Asmodeus. So, yes, is kind of the leader there. The ruler is Lord Mayor Gracious Alozario. So those are the two things, a ruler and a leader of this place. So, you know, we got these two important figures who basically control this massive metropolis in this place of over 80,000 people. It's divided up into 23 official and unofficial districts. I'm not going to go to the depths of all about them. Again, we have a lot of information about Cheliax. I'm keeping it simple for today. If you want to dive into like the full things along the books I suggested, you know, we'll get into more about all the different things about major cities and stuff. Golarion is one of the largest halfling settlements in the Inner Sea region. Most of the population was originally held in slavery. With them being free, yeah, now they're. So, you know, with slavery being abolished, halflings are in a better place there, but there was a huge population of halflings. Okay, we are almost done talking about Cheliax for today. We'll talk about some Cheliaxians. And there is a Cheliaxian Devilbinder doing their works. So who lives there? Well, 3/4 of the population are ethnic Taldains. You have to know now that this is something I think I talked about a little bit before, but it's something that's a little bit more in old lore. I have to be first edition. Cheliax was their own ethnicity from Taldains, but were descended from it. Effectively now, Cheliaxian is just a subset of the Taldain ethnicity at this point in time. Kelids being the other populous minority for humans based in it, clustered in a lot of the northern reaches of Cheliax. The pale-skinned Taldains of Cheliax believe themselves superior, basically because they made deals with devils and came to this great power, and yeah. Mostly the Inhabitants have become used to the repressive government with infernal ties, seeing it as the price they paid to avoid the great civil war they once suffered. And basically, they actively support the government in most places. And they tend to receive the greatest chance at wealth and social development to do that. And they're basically unwilling to... If you're unwilling or unable to contribute to the regime, you don't reap those rewards. Wine, opera, architecture are major parts of Cheliax. But it's infamous for its depiction of devils on its street and its mercilessness of the laws, which I talked about. So a big thing I did mention, of course, just a little bit more details on it here, is, you know, the Emancipation Edict of 4722. Basically, before there, slavery was prevalent and basically harshly envoyed, and practically devoid of legal protections since the Aroden's era. So that was another thing, you know. And again, in its wake, the Edict offered 5 years of financial support to the newly freed, but burdened those benefits with numerous onerous conditions, including mandatory military conscription, waivers for legal claims against their slaves, and exorbitant repayment terms. So basically, we freed you, but we put a bunch of, like, things in place which still make us that we can take advantage of you, so we can use you until you technically get yourself your feet, but you also do get some financial support, and they're lawful evil. They're not freeing you for good reasons. They're freeing you because they don't want you to rebel, but they still want you to be useful until you make yourself a useful, integrated member of society, and got you some problems. So, meritocracy is important in their society. We have to keep that in mind for the culture. They place a high value on excellence in almost any endeavor, and its nobles are in constant competition to elevate their statuses. So Cheliax perceives itself as a more mediocratic society compared to many others in Golarion, because ambitious individuals of low birth can find patrons willing to support their careers in exchange for profit and recognition, and some may even secure titles through marriage or bribery. Hell Knights provide also a source for rapid advancement of those that prove themselves in dedicated service. Of course, this meritocracy has a dark side. If you're unfortunate enough to lack in the qualities it prizes, you're treated as kind of worthless, stripped of basic deity and consideration, and it only applies to human residents. Your non-human residents are kind of universally looked down upon. Most gnomes that live in there live in Brastelwark and enjoy relatively peaceful existence compared to most minorities. They're architects and engineers, and the best of these provide designs for the Cheliaxian government. So the community is left basically mostly to itself because, hey, these being great architects and engineers, these gnomes, they are prized and liked, you know? So, again, prior to the emancipation, most halflings were slaves. They were known as slips. And there still are treated generally poorly by the general population, even though now they're free. Still not treated well. Of course, I mentioned the Strix of Devil's Perch. It's basically a dangerous, inhospitable region of the Mendor Mountains. And due to past conflicts with their lowland neighbors, they have, don't really trust humans. So, Cheliaxians really can't do much about them. It's not really a great region. They basically keep mostly for themselves. Cambions, those of Devil Bloods, have a strange status here. Subordinate. They're rarely seen in public, and appear mainly in criminal enterprises, or were, prior to the Emancipation Edict, slaves. The majority are hellspawn, of course, makes sense. Many within the Cheliaxian government view them with complete expendability, and prior to the abolition of slavery, used them for the most flimsy pretexts to force them into it, or to sell them to a nation willing to buy them. Some Hunger Seed Cambions of Oni blood live there too, descended from Oni Doshi, ogre mages that served as arcane mercenaries for the Cheliaxians. So not really treated well there, even though there's that connection to it. Most humans speak Taldain, and there are a few that are conversing the diabolic language. Let's talk religion before we finish out today. Just a little. It'll be the last talking to you. So, it has been a religious nation, going back hundreds of years. Iomade, the chivalrous goddess of crusades, was born in Cheliax, and her righteous faith continues to hold strong in the region, despite recent events, and have heightened the long-standing tension between her church and that of Asmodeus. In the middle of the 5th millennia AR, the Church of Aroden, humanity's patron deity, moved its headquarters from decadent Taldor to Westcrown. This was done in response to ancient Aslanti prophecy, the Starfall Doctrine I mentioned. And with his death, prophecy's gone, the Civil War happened. So the rise of Asmodean worship began. And it's not surprising that it's gone very strong. Every Cheliaxian pays at least lip service to the Prince of Darkness. Even though numerous older gods, such as Abadar and Arastal, remain popular among the common folk, nearly every house contains at least one shrine or red pentagram to honor the devil. So again, Abadar, Arastal, they're very common gods everywhere. That's why their worship, their look at, is tolerated there. They're the common gods. They're the gods that, get along with Asmodeus. Cheliax is one of the few nations that other archdevils are worshipped in any large number, though their cultists are always stand in the shadows of, the Church of Asmodeus. Even though Cheliaxians aren't interested in personally serving the Prince of Hell or one of his subordinates, they believe that Hell provides a model for how society should be structured, the philosophy of Diabolism. And according to an edict issued by Queen Abigail II, the worship of gods other than Asmodee or one of the other powers of Hell is permitted, but can be revoked by the government at any time. The worship of these gods is considered a generous allowance by the Prince of Hell, as long as no one supplants him as the foremost hearts of Cheliaxians. So, Cheliax does not openly tolerate the worship of a Chechek due to the church's support of piracy along the coast of Grund, but the assassins of the gods still have several hidden shrines devoted to him throughout Cheliax. But that is, of course, where we end our discussion on Cheliax. As I said, there's a lot of details, mixed bag of details on all the different cities, but you can see we have like a couple dozen cities we know a little bit of information on. And some of them we know a lot on. I didn't really go into depth about it because, yeah, I don't want to be here forever. I'm, already hitting nearly an hour for this video. We're not going to add another half an hour. But it's an interesting nation because it's one that is central to so many storylines and so many things happen. It has had a lot of stuff that's just occurred there. So many wars, so much stuff. And certainly it has been involved, at least directly or indirectly, in a bunch of major adventures and a bunch of major going-ons. It has been the forefront of so many, basically, adventure paths and adventures that you have to understand Cheliax is important. Is it the major villain of some of these stories? Yes and no. Cheliax is not a great place. It's not a good place. It's a lawful evil place. They worship Asmund. They are devil worshippers. There's no denying that. But they do maintain an order, and honestly speaking, you can judge them and understand them a lot more than many other more chaotic or violent nations. You kind of know what you're getting with Cheliax and the nation Cheliax. And I think that's an important part of this entire thing. They are a backdrop of something kind of terrible, but it's not as if though they aren't evolving a little bit too. Not for good reasons, more to maintain power. But yeah, like freeing all the slaves. Again, doesn't mean they can't change their mind. At least for now. Major source of slavery and abolishing slavery in the region, because they did it. That's the kind of interesting thing, is that there has been this move, along with some of the more recent nations, to get rid of that. Remove slavery. And we've been seeing it throughout the Inner Sea region, the movement growing. And Cheliax, 2 years ago, getting rid of it, that's a big sign of it. And that's a sign of things to change, because Cheliax, as much as it's much less at the center of what goes on, they still kind of are. They're still connected with it. When Taldain fell, Cheliax rose. And now Cheliax is kind of fallen, but it's still there. Taldor is still there. The Taldain Empire. Taldor Empire. So those two nations are still there, but Cheliax just still involves itself in so much more. And not getting rid of it anytime soon. So it's good to know about it. Hey, there's still possibility for adventures, and maybe we'll do one of those adventure paths, dealing with rebellions or some of the other stuff that goes on. As I said, even though the adventure path I'm running, Curse of the Crimson Throne, the version of it I'm running, I'm using a lot of those connections to Cheliax that are still there. They're there. I'll leave it there today, though. I'm going to say, everybody, thank you for joining me. Remember to check out all my other stuff, whether it's live on Twitch, as I am now, or over on the YouTube side. Remember, here on the YouTube side, do all those support things, the piece of algorithm. My schedule for doing this stuff, recording it live, is Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. Thursdays being the day that I do most of my Pathfinder stuff. You can always check it out later on YouTube. You can't join me. Love for you to. If you can't, you can always do that. Crimson Queen, as I mentioned, the version of Crimson Throne I'm running. Wednesdays at 9 p.m. in the evening, EST, and Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6, where we talk about news of the week in the tabletop world and deeper discussion topics. That's all my shout-outs for scheduling, all the stuff I do. Remember to check out social media down below. And I'm going to go hang out with some Twitch some more as I finish up today. And until the next time, everybody up on YouTube, and everybody else that's just joining me and wants to leave after this, I bid all you a deep and wonderful farewell.